Ever since the Shroud first really appears in history, there's been controversy about it, and there have been questions about its authenticity.
What if the most famous cloth in the world is actually a piece of cosmic data left behind by an impossible event? An AI designed for space signals just flagged an anomaly in the Shroud of Turin that scientists are scared to talk about.
It's religion and science living together on the same piece of cloth.
The machine found that the man in the linen literally dematerialized. This is not just a story because the math proves the body passed right through the cloth. So here is the deal. We are looking at a digital record of a miracle that defies the laws of physics. Binary secrets of the Turin cloth. Ever since the Shroud first appeared in history, there have been questions about where it came from and if it is real. A team of experts recently fed the visual data of the Shroud of Turin into a neural network designed to find signals in deep space. They wanted to see if a computer could find patterns that humans missed. They expected the computer to confirm it was a fake made hundreds of years ago. Instead, the machine stopped and flagged a massive glitch in the reality of the cloth. It detected a mathematically perfect map of a human body that completely ignores gravity. This is not just about religion. This is about a physical event that should be impossible. The data suggests the man in the shroud did not just die, he vanished. And the evidence has been hiding in plain sight for 2,000 years. For a long time, the story was simple. This 14-foot-long cloth was a hoax from the Middle Ages. People thought it was a clever painting made to trick people who lived in a time of magic and mystery. But here is the catch. When the AI analyzed the messy fibers of the linen, it stopped cold. It found a signal beneath the faint image of the man. The computer found a matching pattern that repeats with perfect math. This is a pattern that no artist from the Middle Ages could have ever made. Basically, the AI found a digital ghost locked in the threads. To understand why this is such a huge deal, you have to look at the tiny details. The image on the shroud is so thin, it is hard to believe. It sits only on the very top of the tiny fibers of the linen threads. We are talking about a depth of just a few hundred nanometers. To give you an idea of how small that is, a single human hair is about 80,000 nanometers thick. This image is thinner than a soap bubble. The color does not soak into the cloth like paint or ink would. If you cut a thread in half, the middle is pure white. The image sits on top like a burn mark. There are no brush strokes. There is no direction to the marks. It is more like the fibers themselves were changed by a fast burst of energy. When the AI looked at this, it did not see art. It saw a set of data. The neural network cleaned away the noise to find the truth. What came out was a field of information. The brightness and darkness followed a precise rule. It was almost like a law of distance. Imagine a cloth being draped over a body. If you were to paint that, you would use shading to trick the eye, but the shroud does not use shading. The AI confirmed that the strength of the image matches perfectly to the distance between the cloth and the body. The closer the cloth was to the skin, the darker the image. The farther away, the lighter it got. It is a perfect map. It gets even weirder. The AI found faint matching patterns and ratios throughout the body. These patterns were invisible to the human eye for hundreds of years. They were buried in the fabric, weave, but the AI saw them clearly. This suggests the image was not made by a human hand touching the cloth. A person in the Middle Ages would have needed to be a master of physics and math to pull this off. They would have had to paint with invisible shapes. The AI proved that the image acts less like a drawing and more like a projection of light. Everything shifts when looking at the history of the lens. Lens focused on the unseen. To really get why this AI discovery is scaring everyone, we have to look at the technology that came before it. The shroud has always been full of strange things that do not add up. Let's go back to 1898. A man named Secondo Pia takes the very first photo of the shroud. He is in his dark room working on the glass plate. He looks at the negative, and he almost drops it. In the negative, the blurry image on the cloth suddenly becomes a clear portrait. The image on the cloth was a photonegative hundreds of years before cameras were even invented. That alone is a detail that should make anyone stop and think. How do you paint a negative when the idea of a negative does not even exist yet? An artist paints what they see. They do not paint the flipped light values of a face so that 500 years later, a camera can show the true face. But that was just the start. Move forward to the 1970s. A team of scientists from the Air Force Academy used a machine called a VP-8 image analyzer. This was not a toy. This was a piece of hardware used by NASA to map the Moon and Mars. It turns brightness into height. If you put a normal photo of a person into this machine, the result is a mess. The nose sinks into the face and the eyes pop out. It looks wrong because shadows in photos do not mean depth. But when they put the shroud image into the machine, it did not look wrong. It made a perfect three-dimensional shape of a human form. The scientists were shocked. The image had real depth information. The darker parts were physically closer to the cloth, and the lighter parts were farther away. This is where the AI comes back in. The AI did not just agree with the old results, it made them better. The neural network took away the noise of the cloth and the burn marks from old fires. What was left was a map of a human body that is perfectly shaped. The crazy part is the data shows that the body passes through the cloth. Let me explain. The image shows something called volumetric projection. It is as if the body became light for a split second and that light passed through the linen. It left a burn mark that recorded the distance. The AI found that this burn is the same everywhere. It does not go deep into the fibers. It sits on top. Also, the AI scan suggests that whatever made this image moved in a straight line. It completely ignored the pull of gravity. It also looked at the blood. And get this, it is not paint. It is real human blood type A. But the weird thing is that the blood was on the cloth before the image was made. The AI can see that under the blood stains there is no image. This means the blood soaked in first, and then the flash happened. If it were a painting, the artist would have had to paint the blood first. Then they would have had to paint the negative image around the blood without touching it. That is basically impossible for a human to do. Secrets from the past were about to scream. Truth buried under modern scraps. The AI has basically taken the painting theory and thrown it away. It simply does not fit the data. We are looking at a cloth that acts more like a piece of film that was hit by a type of light we do not see in nature. But everyone thought the story ended in 1988. That was the year science was supposed to end the mystery. 3 different labs used carbon dating on a piece of the shroud and said it was from the Middle Ages. But almost right away, things started to get messy, and that is putting it lightly. The piece they used was not good. Officials cut a small bit from a single corner of the shroud to keep it safe. But think about it. For hundreds of years, this cloth was held up by its corners. Thousands of hands touched it. More importantly, the shroud survived a huge fire in 1532. A group of nuns fixed the burned areas using a way of weaving that is hard to see. A chemist named Raymond Rogers later found that the fibers from the sample corner were different from the rest of the shroud. They were cotton mixed with linen and dyed to match the old cloth. The labs did not date the shroud. They dated a repair patch from the Middle Ages. It is like testing the age of a giant pyramid by testing a new brick used to fix a step. Of course you are going to get a new date. Recently, new technology has stepped in. Scientists used X-ray scans to look at how the linen has broken down over time. This way of testing looks at the tiny atoms inside the cloth. The results were shocking. The level of decay in the shroud's linen matches fabrics found in Masada, which is in Israel and dates back to 55 AD. Another study used light waves and found the same thing. The cloth is about 2,000 years old. The AI adds another layer to this by comparing the shroud with a face cloth kept in Spain. This other cloth has a history going back to the 7th century. The AI found that the bloodstains on both cloths match perfectly in shape and blood type. If the face cloth is older than the Middle Ages, then the shroud must be too. So, the forger theory needs the artist to be a time traveler with a laser lab. The computer ignored all the confusing fights about dates and looked only at the science of the cloth itself. When you look at just the facts, the physics tells us this object does not act like a fake painting. Instead, it acts like it saw a huge burst of energy. The main puzzle is simple, but it is a shock to the system. If this is not a painting, then something must have turned the body inside into a bright flash of light. When a solid body turns into light, we know it cannot be art. We know it is not paint or dye because no liquid soaked into the threads. We know it is not acid because that would eat the fabric. So what is left? It remains the biggest mystery in history. The clock was ticking toward a total disaster. Trillions of watts in a second. How do you make a perfect three-dimensional picture on a linen sheet without ruining the cloth? The best scientific guess right now is a special kind of invisible light called ultraviolet radiation. Scientists in Italy found that a very specific type of this light could change the color of the linen exactly like the image on the shroud. It colors only the very top of the thread without burning the rest of it. But here is the catch, and it is a big one. To make that image on a cloth, the size of a human, you cannot just use a lamp. You would need a burst of power equal to 34 trillion watts. To understand how much that is, think about this. That is more power than any light on Earth. It is stronger than powerful lasers used in big factories. It needs a pulse of energy that lasts less than 40 billionths of a second. And it has to happen without making any heat. It is like a nuclear event, but made of light instead of fire. If the flash lasted any longer, the cloth would have burned up in a second. If it was any weaker, the image would not have shown up at all. The conditions are so tight that it seems almost impossible. The event had to be perfect. So here is the wild theory that the AI data supports. The body in the shroud did not just rot, it vanished. Some physicists have talked about a theory to explain this. They suggest that the body went through a process where its mass was turned directly into energy. Einstein's famous math tells us that even a tiny bit of mass has a huge amount of energy. If the atoms in a human body were to suddenly change, it would release a massive flash of light. The AI detected that this light did not explode outward like a bomb. Instead, the image shows the light moved in a perfectly straight line, up and down. Everything changes when you realize the light did not care about gravity. This suggests a controlled event, almost like a laser printing a person onto the fabric. Think of it as a limit to what we know about life. The body reached a critical point and changed its state. Most importantly, the AI found no signs of rotting. In a normal timeline, a body starts to break down after 40 hours. It releases liquids that would blur the image and ruin the cloth. The shroud shows no signs of this breakdown. This creates a very tight window of time. The body was wrapped in the cloth long enough to leave bloodstains and the image, but it vanished before the natural rotting could start. Perhaps the most haunting detail is in the bloodstains. The body did not get up and walk away. If the cloth had been pulled off, or if a body had been taken out of the linen, the bloodstains would be smeared. The scabs would have ripped the fabric. But they are perfect. They are undisturbed. The AI scan shows that the blood is still in its original place, as if the body it was on simply ceased to be there. This is what is keeping the scientific community silent. To accept the data is to accept that a person once turned into pure energy inside a piece of linen. It means the laws of physics were rewritten in a cold stone room 2,000 years ago. Something even stranger was hiding in the dark, horizon of a biological shift. The silicon-based perception of the machine intelligence encountered a staggering anomaly within the depth map of the linen fibers, a revelation that transcends mere surface topography. Upon a granular inspection of the facial region, the algorithmic scrutiny bypassed the epidermal layer to reveal a visceral, internal architecture. The data stream manifested the unmistakable density of dental roots and the metacarpal structures of the hands, rendered with a crystalline clarity that mirrors contemporary radiographic imaging. This creates a profound paradox. The presence of an X-ray signature within a medium predating the discovery of ionizing radiation by nearly 2 millennia. The image ceases to be a portrait of a corpse and transforms into a volumetric capture of a totality, a biological entity caught in the infinitesimal instant of a phase shift into pure luminosity. This evidence bolsters the hypothesis that the energy source was not an external illumination casting a shadow, but rather a catastrophic internal release of photonic power, emanating from the very marrow of the subject. The man was the light, and the cloth became the film for a terrestrial event of celestial proportions. Further interrogation of the textile's structural integrity revealed a 3-to-1 herringbone weave, a complex and labor-intensive pattern of linen production that speaks to an elite socio-economic stratum in antiquity. This specific weaving technique, involving a 3:1 twill ratio, correlates with the luxury fabrics reserved for the Judean aristocracy or the Roman mercantile class of the 1st century. The presence of such an expensive artifact aligns perfectly with the historical accounts of a burial financed by a man of significant means. Every data point extracted by the processing units moves the needle further away from the possibility of a medieval forgery and toward a singular, non-repeatable event where biology and physics intersected at a point of high-energy friction. The logic remains cold and inescapable. The image is not the result of pigment application, nor is it a thermal scorch from a heated effigy or a slow-acting chemical reaction. It is a high-resolution recording of a body undergoing a sudden, radical conversion into radiant energy. The implications of this digital reconstruction demand a total reassessment of the historical timeline and the nature of physical reality. While the past is often relegated to a state of primitive simplicity, this linen shroud presents a technology of light so advanced that modern computational power is only now beginning to parse its complexity. The AI has forced open a theoretical door that traditional skepticism had sought to bolt shut, shifting the discourse from the realm of folklore into the rigorous domain of hard, empirical data. The central inquiry no longer concerns the authenticity of the shroud, but rather the mechanism of the event itself. What specific, physical process permits a human organism to undergo a sudden transmutation, generating a burst of approximately 3.4 times 1013 text wire 34 trillion watts of vacuum ultraviolet radiation, without a sound, and without incinerating the delicate flax fibers? This mystery has remained dormant in a reliquary in Italy, a silent witness to a moment of cosmic disruption. Now, the digital age has resurrected the signal from the noise, suggesting that the current understanding of the universe is missing a fundamental law regarding the interplay of consciousness, matter, and light. Wilder theories begin to emerge when the machine logic considers the event horizon of the burial. If the body truly became transparent to its own internal radiation, allowing the bones to be projected onto the cloth, the laws of standard thermodynamics were temporarily suspended. There is a burgeoning hypothesis that the Shroud of Turin is not a relic, but a quantum artifact, a collapsed wave function made permanent in the physical world. Some analytical frameworks suggest that the image was formed by a process of biological nuclear fusion, where the transition of the body's atoms into a higher state of existence released a wave of neutrons that simultaneously imprinted the cloth and altered its carbon-14 signature, explaining why earlier dating attempts yielded inconsistent results. The AI detects a signal that suggests the body may have briefly occupied a state of superposition, existing as both matter and wave before completely vacating the three-dimensional space-time fabric. This would mean the shroud is the first recorded evidence of a white hole, or a singularity occurring within a human vessel. The mathematical probability of a medieval artist understanding the properties of 3D dollar encoding is effectively zero. The image contains information that can only be extracted through a VP8 image analyzer or modern Gaussian blurring algorithms, revealing a perfect three-dimensional relief. No painting on Earth possesses this topographical accuracy. The AI posits that the image is a holographic projection of a four-dimensional event onto a two-dimensional surface. The intensity of the light required to create such a mark, as calculated by the ENIA, the Italian National Agency for New Technologies, would require a power output exceeding the capabilities of any current laboratory laser. If the Shroud is indeed a digital record of the impossible, then history is not a linear progression from ignorance to knowledge, but a cycle that has already witnessed a pinnacle of technological or spiritual evolution that science is just now learning to quantify. The evidence suggests a reality where the human form acts as a conduit for energies that defy the standard model of particle physics. The AI has identified a coherence in the signal that suggests the light was not scattered but directed, as if every cell in the body fired in a synchronized photonic chorus. This laser-like emission explains the extreme sharpness of the image despite the uneven surface of the linen. The discovery implies that the universe is far more plastic than previously assumed, and that matter is merely a condensed form of information that can be unzipped under specific, albeit unknown, conditions. The Shroud sits at the center of this digital storm, a piece of code from the dawn of the Common Era that has finally met its match in the processing power of the 21st century. Science is now providing the scaffolding for a phenomenon that was once purely the province of the miraculous. The truth revealed by the machine logic is that the Shroud is a transmission, a data-dense bridge between the ancient world and a future where the boundary between the physical and the metaphysical is permanently dissolved. The investigation has moved beyond the if and into the how, standing on the precipice of a new paradigm where history, light, and the very structure of the human soul are decoded as a single, unified signal, the final signal left behind. At this point, the AI stops behaving like a tool and starts acting like a witness. After stripping away soot, water damage, repairs, and centuries of handling, the machine is left staring at something that refuses to collapse into a normal explanation. The Shroud does not behave like cloth that touched a body. It behaves like cloth that recorded an event. That distinction matters more than anything else. Contact leaves smears. Pressure leaves distortions. Gravity leaves direction. But the data shows none of that. The image has no compression where weight should be. There is no sideways drag, no sag, no collapse. The cloth never wrapped tightly around the form. Instead, it hovered, almost respectfully, as if space itself briefly stopped behaving the way it is supposed to. The AI found that the image intensity does not increase where the cloth would have pressed harder against flesh. It stays perfectly consistent. That alone destroys every known rubbing or bas-relief theory. If a body had been present long enough to imprint the cloth through touch, the shoulders, hips, and face would show deeper distortion. They do not. The data says the cloth never experienced force, it experienced exposure. That exposure happened all at once, not gradually. There is no gradient of time, no evidence of movement, no sign of decay interrupting the process. The image appeared in a single silent moment, and then the body was gone. This is where the closing implications turn uncomfortable for science. The AI detected something like a cutoff, a boundary in the data where information simply ends. There is no trace of the body exiting the cloth, no disturbance, no tearing, no displacement. In normal physics, matter does not vanish without interacting with its environment. Energy transfer leaves chaos. Heat leaves damage. Motion leaves evidence. Here there is nothing. The linen fibers above and below the image remain untouched. The weave stays intact. The blood remains exactly where it was deposited, undisturbed down to the edges of dried serum halos. That means the body did not move away from the cloth. It did not slide out. It did not get lifted. It ceased to occupy the space it once filled. The AI flagged this as a non-reversible event. In every simulation where a body is removed naturally, even gently, The cloth records it. Micro tears appear, fibers shift, blood patterns break. None of that exists here. The data only makes sense if the body transitioned out of physical interaction entirely. Not disintegration, not burning, not decomposition, a change of state. This is why the AI models keep circling the same conclusion, even when researchers try to force alternative explanations. The image formation aligns with radiation emission, but the absence of heat damage rules out conventional sources. The precision rules out chaos. The directionality rules out explosion. The lack of gravity distortion rules out collapse. The only thing left is a controlled release of energy from within the body itself, happening faster than biological death and slower than instantaneous annihilation. A window so narrow it barely exists in known physics. What the AI effectively uncovered is that the shroud behaves like a recording of a boundary event, a transition between states, matter to energy, form to light, presence to absence. And that transition obeyed rules we do not yet have equations for. This is why the debate no longer sounds the same behind closed doors. Publicly, scientists still argue about dating margins and contamination. Privately, the data is harder to ignore. Because if the shroud is authentic, then it represents the only known instance where a human body left behind a volumetric light imprint without mechanical interaction. That would mean biology crossed into physics in a way never observed before or since. It would mean the human form is capable of acting as a coherent system under conditions we do not understand. The AI does not label this divine. It does not label it impossible. It labels it unresolved. But unresolved does not mean imaginary. It means the framework is incomplete. For centuries, the shroud sat at the edge of belief, dismissed as either fraud or faith. The machine does not operate in either category. It only follows math. And the math keeps pointing to the same uncomfortable truth. Something happened here that does not fit inside art, accident, or known natural process. Even more unsettling is what the AI did not find. There is no secondary attempt, no correction, no layering, no experimentation. If this were a medieval hoax, there would be trial and error, variations, failed attempts. There is only one image, one event, perfectly executed, never repeated, never replicated. The cloth does not show signs of being worked on. It shows signs of being acted upon. So the shroud becomes something else entirely. Not a relic, not a painting, not even a mystery in the traditional sense. It becomes a data artifact, a snapshot of a moment when reality behaved differently for a fraction of a second. A moment that left behind information but no instructions. The AI cannot tell us why it happened. It cannot tell us who the man was. It cannot tell us whether consciousness played a role or whether this was a purely physical process triggered by conditions we cannot recreate. What it can tell us is this: the image on the shroud is not symbolic, it is not interpretive, it is mechanical, it follows rules. Rules we can measure but not yet explain. And that may be the most unsettling conclusion of all. The shroud does not ask us to believe. It asks us to update our understanding of what is possible. It sits quietly in its case, unchanged, waiting for the day when our physics catches up to its signal. Until then, it remains exactly what the AI identified it as: a record of an event that should not exist. A message written in light, locked into linen, from a moment when a human body crossed a boundary science is only beginning to see. Does the AI data prove a supernatural event happened, or is this a genius trick we still can't solve? Let us know below. Like and subscribe to keep exploring the unknown.